Welcome back to the Call in Our Shot podcast, episode 44. I'm Austin, joined by Logan. Today we're talking all about the MLB. Maybe we'll sprinkle in a little bit of NFL action at the end, but the trade deadline's less than a week away. But first and foremost, Logan, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's like you said, MLB trade deadline's a big time because in the MLB, a lot of these non-contender teams are definitely sellers in this market. So I'm really interested to see what sort of moves are made, and those teams that are right on the fringe of contention. Can this be the piece that puts them over? I'm really interested to see it. But how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to get into this, and I'm more excited for next week because if a lot of people don't know, we post these every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, but we do record Tuesday night just so we can get it live for you guys. And we'll know by next Tuesday, everyone that's dealt, because the trade deadline, I believe, is at like 4 p.m. on next Tuesday. So we'll know exactly. We'll react to all the deals. Hopefully we see a lot of deals. And in addition to talk about the MLB trade deadline, we'll also talk about some betting tips for the MLB. But as always, if you guys aren't subscribed, we certainly would appreciate if you go down below, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button too. We can't do it without all you guys' love and support. So thank you guys all so much for supporting the channel. And without further ado, Logan, let's start talking about some people. And I don't think there's a bigger name on the trade block than this guy in Washington, D.C., Juan Soto. Now, we obviously know that Juan Soto has been a lot in the rumors. You know, he rejected the 15-year, $440 million deal. And a lot of people kind of maybe gave him some slack. And I don't blame him for rejecting that deal. But what's your initial take on Juan Soto? You just saw him live a couple months ago. So what is your take on Mr. Soto?
Yeah, the Juan Soto situation is really interesting because he could have pulled the Carmelo Anthony. He could have had the bag and stayed in Washington, but it doesn't seem like there's that's really going to work out. So it's really interesting if they are going to move him. You move a franchise player like that, where you would move him. And you know what kind of rubs me the wrong way? I hate how the Dodgers just always are in the running for these types of players. All they do is just collect talent and like it's nothing. Just it's like Thanos collecting stones. Like that's all they do is just buy all the good players. And when Juan Soto was recently, so we were recording this in a night before, but the last night when the Nationals did win, he hit like a bouncing triple up in there, and everyone in the outfield's like cheering him, like, "Hey, you're coming to LA!" And he turned around and like laughed at him and like nodded his head. And so he's having fun with the LA crowd that appears to think they're gonna get him. Really don't. I hope he doesn't go there, but I'm interested to see what you think, where you think he might end up, because I think I have a great landing spot that isn't like I don't know how he could make it to this team. But I would love to see him being a St. Louis Cardinal, because I think they're just one more solid offensive piece, like a Juan Soto, that can get on base. They're just one solid piece away from being that like title contender. Now, the Cardinals pitching has let them down a little bit. I won't lie to you there. But I think if you were to have a three-headed attack of Arenado, Goldschmidt, and Juan Soto, I mean, that would be enough to maybe even outscore teams in the playoff time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like Juan Soto is probably not getting dealt at the trade deadline this year. I would love to see it just because I like to see big moves, I like to see big name guys move. But when I think about Juan Soto, looking at his kind of where he stands from, I mean, for starters, people see $440 million. That's life changing money, but they don't really break it down to like the yearly amount. Like that would have been less than $30 million per year. And while that seems like, he's a spoiled brat kind of thing, rejecting that amount of money, I mean, he could probably go out there and sign a 3-year deal for $40 million kind of thing. So I think he could get a lot more money long-term wise if he doesn't go to this long, 10, 15-year kind of contract. So, and we've seen the Nationals fumble the bag repeatedly. They did it with Bryce Harper, did it with Trey Turner. They haven't shown a commitment to wanting to be a successful team, a successful franchise. We know they just won the World Series within the last 5 years, but they just haven't shown that commitment to always wanting to be that World Series team. So I don't blame Juan Soto, saying, I don't really know about this. It's not the best deal. I'm sure if they offered him more money, maybe he'd reconsider. But I mean, I say more money as in $440 million. Is that not enough? But I blame him for rejecting it. Now, he did get the Nationals PR in a bad spot, whether by them not chartering a flight for him to the home run derby, and then he got them looking bad, looking like they were salty that he turned down their extension. But in terms of where do I think he goes, I don't really think it's going to be the Dodgers. I just have a hard time seeing the Nationals trading it to him, and I have a hard time believing that the Dodgers have the best package of trade assets and draft picks to send to him. I could see a team like the Cardinals. I haven't looked at a ton of what the pieces the Cardinals have. I could also see a team like the Mets that have been rumored for him. Obviously, the Mets are kind of trying to go all in. They kind of got this, they got Max Scherzer, who's getting older and older as the years go on. Jacob deGrom should hopefully be back, knock on wood, in the next couple weeks. So it's a team that could be, trying to make that all-in move, and Juan Soto would certainly be it. But I just don't see him getting traded. Very similar to how, I don't hate to compare it to the NBA, but like a Kevin Durant thing. Like the asking price is too high. And I don't think that asking price is going to come down enough over the next week for Juan Soto to be dealt. I think he's more maybe in the offseason we see him moved.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, because when it comes to baseball, the Nationals can ask the world for Juan Soto. And at the end of the day, like, are you really going to pay? Are you really going to maybe set your franchise back several years by, like, Juan Soto is a, obviously a left fielder, right? So like he offensively, he is definitely a game changer, but like what is he most known for? Yeah, obviously a pretty respectable batting average. He's known for just constantly being on base with his ability to draw walks. But when you look at it, the fact that of how many prospects and talented players you're probably going to have to give up, draft picks, etc. If I'm a team, I'm not looking at Juan Soto like, okay, you know what, he's the missing piece. The only type of teams that would probably do it is, like you said, the teams that are like, this is our year, we have to go for it. Screw the farm system. We're gonna give everybody we got. So
yeah, and it has to match the timeline for the team. And Juan Soto obviously, isn't the youngest guy in the world, not the oldest. So he does match some teams' timeline that have, older guys on their roster. But I just don't see him getting dealt. But I would love to be able to react to a Juan Soto trade next Tuesday night, a week from today. I would absolutely love it. So if they want to trade Juan Soto, fine by me. I kind of want to move a little bit of a different direction. Go to two pitchers that are rumored, and one would be Luis Castillo of the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously, he's a pitcher, and right now there's a couple teams kind of looming, kind of looking at maybe the Luis Castillo. There's a couple ones. The Yankees are a team rumored to get him. What do you think about that? And do you think there's a better team that should trade for him?
Yeah, Luis Castillo is an interesting one, because if I'm the Yankees, yeah, of course I would like an arm like him, because if you look at the Yankees rotation, like, come playoff time, which the Yankees will obviously be there, they're probably going to be in the ALCS, at a minimum. It's Garrett Cole, it's Nestor Cortez, it's potentially Luis Severino, but Luis Castillo would fit in nicely to where they're not having to, rely on, Jordan Montgomery and a few turkey tossers like that. I'm trying to think of another. I know the Yankees, and they don't really want their playoff hopes, hinging on a guy like Montgomery. They want a guy like Luis Castillo that can carry them that six, potentially even 7 innings. He's a very efficient pitcher, and get them to that. The Yankees bullpen is like one of the best in the league. So they want a pitcher that just is so controlled. Luis Castillo, what he's been for the Reds, he's just been a really good controlled pitcher that, he's just, he has his occasional, bad games, every once in a while, but every pitcher does. Luis Castillo should if I'm a title contending team this year, I'm definitely going for it. I think he's the grand prize. I am interested to see, probably the Yankees will get him because it's what they do.
Yeah, Luis Castillo is a guy I 100% think gets dealt, and it would not surprise me if you see him go to the Yankees. I think the Yankees have realized in the last, 5-10 years, when they've really been struggling to get to that World Series and get over the hump. They've obviously still had a lot of talent, and they're still going to continue to have a lot of talent for the foreseeable future. But what they've noticed is that their pitching staff, it hasn't been the strongest, and this is probably the strongest it's been in the last 5-10 years. But they have not suffered a significant injury. And I'm not rooting for an injury. I'm a Yankees fan. I'm going to root for him. But their starters, they're 5 guys. The Cole, Cortez, Severino is the one that has, been injured. But Tyone and Montgomery, those guys relatively haven't missed many starts. Severino would be the only guy that's really missed. The other 4 guys have started, 17 to 20 games this year. I think the Yankees know they can't afford, an injury to go down like that, because I don't really know who their 6th and 7th guys are. So I think a guy like Luis Castillo, whether, he is that 5th guy in their rotation, 4th or 5th guy, I don't really necessarily know where he fits in, but it is always important in the playoffs to have guys that can not only come in for a little bit of relief, but also go, 2, 3, 4, 5 innings. You sometimes see in the playoffs teams throwing guys in on short rest. If your guy gets, maybe Garrett Cole comes in on 3 or 4 days rest, doesn't have his A-game stuff, you need another arm to go to, and Luis Castillo would be that kind of guy for this Yankees roster. So 100%, I'm looking at an article. They really project him to go there. Would not be surprised to see the Yankees, kind of a team that is all in right now. They have to go all in. They have the best record in MLB.
Yeah, you saw, I think, yeah, well, obviously when Severino was injured and the Yankees had to go to the bullpen type games, those types of games didn't really work out for them. And I was like, that could spell a little bit of trouble. I think the Yankees front office definitely knows our bullpen is great at finishing games, 2, 3 innings type games. They're very tactical in what they do there. But a guy like Luis Castillo would fit in perfectly. And look, we just talked about the team. I would love to see him, and he's not going to this team because there's no way they would possibly trade him. But I would love to see him go to the Cardinals because to me, their biggest weakness is pitching. And this would be in the division, so the Reds aren't going to face Luis Castillo constantly. They're not going to do it. I'm just saying that would be such a good fit. Some of these like NL contender teams, I look at, I'm trying to think of another one, but I really do think a team deficient in pitching, they should offer a lot for Luis Castillo.
Yeah, and kind of staying on the same trend of pitching, we're going to look at Frankie Montas of the Oakland Athletics. Obviously, he's a pitcher. You look at his record, I think he's like 3-9 on the year with like a 3 ERA. I mean, it's not his fault. He's stuck with the Athletics team. But right now he's rumored to go to the Twins. That's at least what this is kind of projecting. And I kind of like that one. We think about the Twins, and a reason, if you watched our last podcast, I was kind of trashing the Twins. I think they're not going to make the playoffs. And it wasn't because they're hitting. This team very talented. Arise, Correa, Buxtons of the world. Team that lacks a lot of strong pitching. And if they're going to not only, I think this could get them over that hump to easily winning their division potentially, and maybe even trying to, be a sneaky team in the playoffs. Obviously, Sonny Gray, I don't want to trust him. Dylan Bundy, Devin Smeltzer, Chris Archer, and then you have Frankie Montas. That's not a terrible rotation, terrible 5-man rotation. It's probably one of the more consistent rotations in the MLB. So is there a team like the Twins you like Montas going there? I think the Athletics are going to be a fire sale team once we get to the deadline in the next week. But what are your kind of thoughts on Frankie?
It's funny about the A's because they kind of fire sold their team in the offseason. I'm like, what more do they have left? They're just going to fire sale. They're going to be just an atrocious baseball team for the second half of the year, I guess, maybe. But okay, I do really like the fit with the Twins. But if we want to talk about another one team in that division, that AL Central, how about the White Sox? Couldn't they use him? I mean, you add him to a rotation with Cease. Can you really rely on Cueto? I mean, who else? Lance Lynn has been a kind of a shell of himself this year. So I think
pretty solid too.
Yeah, I think White Sox would be a great fit. And how about the other Sox? How about the Red Sox? If they were able to get their hands on a pitcher like this, I don't know what the Red Sox would have to offer. I don't know what sort of cap situation, anything like that. But I'm just saying from a player perspective, Red Sox are in desperate need of pitchers. They really don't want to be throwing out the Winkowskis of the world, trying to make any sort of playoff push. They're a team that's sort of reeling at the moment. And I mean, if I were their front office, I'm like, we need a pitcher like now. So
yeah, I mean, Frankie Montas is a pretty solid pitcher. He goes farther than his analytics might suggest, but he's very solid. Those teams you mentioned, Red Sox, White Sox, I'd like to see him go in the White Sox. I obviously don't want to root for the Red Sox ever, but I like the White Sox a little bit more just because, Lance Lynn has been straight turkey tossing since he returned, and maybe he needs to be sent, to minor leagues just to kind of work on his stuff because he's really not looked good. And he was a guy that they could rely on last year as arguably their number 1, number 2 starter, and that's been Cease. Cease has been dominant over the last 11 starts, only allowing 3 earned runs total. So he's been on an historic pace. But another guy like Montas to step in there, kind of provide that little push to get to the playoffs because we know this is a White Sox team with the batting to obviously support a good starting pitcher. The problem is when Lance Lynn comes in, gives up 6 earned runs, it's kind of hard to, kind of support that. Kind of moving on to the Royals, we're going to go to some more hitters. A guy that we're going to be rooting on tonight, Andrew Benintendi of the Royals. Obviously, we're rooting on him to get a hit. I have no idea if he got a hit. If you didn't get a hit, you probably would have seen me mad on Twitter, and probably mad in the daily video that came live before this. But he's been rumored. We think about the Royals, it's a team that I don't really know if Benintendi fits their timeline. I mean, he's rumored to go to the Blue Jays. Another team that I could see him going to, same division, would be the Yankees, a team that's been, looking for a guy that I think gets on base a lot. We know Benintendi is the king of the single. That's all he does. He gets on base, and that's what the Yankees need. They have a lot of guys that are swing for the fences guys. The only problem is I don't really know where Benintendi fits into the lineup. I mean, I think he's been batting number 2 in the Royals lineup, but I don't really know how the Yankees probably don't want to mess with the top 5 of their lineup with, LeMahieu, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton kind of thing. And then Matt Carpenter's come on late, although Matt Carpenter's not going to continue his rate. But what's your kind of thoughts on Benintendi? Is there a team you like? The Blue Jays, Yankees, another team that you could see him going to? Because it's another guy that could be traded that's batting 330 on the year, 320.
Yeah, the Blue Jays is an interesting fit because to me, they're such a talented offense and with the power that he could be inserted into that Blue Jays lineup and make a difference. Like you said, the Yankees is an interesting fit because I'm just sitting here and I'm like, this is a top half of the order guy. As you mentioned, I'm like, who's he gonna bump out, right? Like, are you just gonna assume that Stanton falls off a little bit in the playoff time? Because when Stanton's not pimping homers, Stanton is useless, right? You got a few guys in that Yankees lineup, and that, in my opinion, are just boom or bust. Not the kind of players you want in the playoff times. I want the guys like the LeMahieus that are constantly leadoff man aboard, guys like that. And if I could imagine a 1-2 punch where it's LeMahieu, Benintendi, and that's two runners on base, and the starting pitcher's he's taking off his hat like, what did I just do? So I mean, that would be a very dangerous situation. I would love to kind of see him in that AL East. That would be great.
I mean, it's the same thing as the Blue Jays, though. I mean, they're a team that's kind of had the same sort of 4 to 5 guys starting the lineup the whole year long. So I'm not sure if Benintendi gets moved. I don't really know. He's an interesting guy. I can't think of a team off the top of my head that could use a guy to go in that top 3, that they need a high batting average guy to get on base, and then has good guys in the 4 and 5. Obviously, we didn't talk about it. Stanton is on the IL for 10 days, I believe, with like an Achilles injury, but I don't think that's going to factor in necessarily to the Yankees potentially going out and try to trade for Benintendi. But he's another guy that's going to be on the radar. What's up?
I have an interesting fit. I'm just kind of looking at like divisional odds, and I'm just kind of like sitting here like thinking, what teams are in here that could just use a push and use an offensive spark? The San Diego Padres could really use a guy like Benintendi. That would be such a good fit for them. Just if you look at the San Diego Padres, there's a whole lot of games that their bats are just MIA, and like straight up didn't even bring them to the game. And a guy like Benintendi constantly being on base, I think would be the sort of spark that they would need. Because I'm looking at, I mean, obviously the books don't give him a chance, snowball's chance in hell to win the NL West. But I don't know what their sort of playoff outlook is. And I don't know. The Padres definitely have the pitching to be able to be a contender. I don't question their pitching one bit. I question their offense. And a guy like him, I think would fit in perfectly in that top half of the order.
Yeah, I think similarly, a team like the Giants wouldn't surprise me either. They're a team that's obviously always messing around with their lineup going so no guy in that lineup really has consistency. They're not like, oh, dang it, I'm not batting first or second. It's just because they're all over the place. They could have one at bat and then get pinch hit. That's just they're a crazy lineup. So in that sense, Andrew Benintendi would be good for that, but also he's used to being, in the same spot every single day. And I don't know if that's how the Giants really operate. They're always just moving guys around. But Benintendi would be cool to see him in a new change of scenery. I mean, this is the guy that's always on base, just waving at his guys, just swinging out for the fences or grounding ball or getting double. I would be curious. I want to look into how many double plays has Benintendi been, the first guy out at second. Like, I'm just curious. He's probably out so many times on just like ground ball from whoever bats third in their lineup that it's just a sad amount. Because like we said, Benintendi, the king of the single. But let's move on to a guy that's already played today, Chicago Cubs, Wilson Contreras. I mean, he's a catcher. He's been linked to the Mets. Also see this article has him linked to the Giants. What's your kind of thoughts on him? Because we've seen the fans kind of give him his, flowers in their most recent game when he hit, I believe he had a hit or something like that. They gave him his flowers. Seems like he's on the way out. What are your kind of thoughts on him?
Yeah, the fan reaction tells you a lot. Like the Cubs are another team that could easily go fire sale mode. That wouldn't surprise anybody. They're not really in contention. So to me, if I'm the New York Mets, that's a big upgrade from their current catcher, Tomas Nido. And there's a lot of Mets fans that will tell you they don't like Nido. And if you put a guy like Wilson Contreras on there, you are just fully going off for it all in this year. I think he would fit in really great with the Mets. And now the Giants, yeah, I mean, I could see it because who do they have at catcher? Maybe Casali? I don't know. Like off the top of my head, sorry, Giants, you have a new lineup every single day. So I don't really know off the top of my head. But I think he fits in a lot better with the Mets just because they're in prime playoff contention. They will probably be, hopefully, they, for Mets fans, they can hang on to that division because the Braves are coming and they know that. That's why the Mets front office you'll probably see them being aggressive during this because they know they can't just stand pat. The Braves are a really good baseball team. They'll come for them in the division. They'll come for them in the playoffs. They're proven World Series champions.
Yeah, and that's why I think we're going to see these teams all go kind of guns a-blazing because there's a lot of good teams out there, very good records that are maybe, a push. They might think a player or two away to, making that extra push. Like you said, Mets are only 2 games above right now, as we record this, and above the Braves, who have been scorching hot since like June started. So, I mean, this is going to be interesting. The Mets, I anticipate to make a move. Will it be for Wilson? Will it be for, guy like Castillo, or for, well, who knows who it will be for? But I expect them to make some moves, and that's going to be interesting to see. Another moving back to Castillo's team. Moving back to the Reds, Brandon Drury has been linked to be traded. He's obviously their third baseman, and I heard a stat today as I was watching our No on first inning, which obviously did cash wave those flags. But for the people, but Brandon Drury, I heard a stat from him. He has the highest slugging percentage versus off-speed pitches this year. Obviously, he's been one of the bright spots for this offense for the Reds. Bounced, I believe, normally second in the lineup. He's been a big bright spot. Now, where is he rumored to go is a good question. There's really, I mean, some people think he could go to Atlanta. I see Atlanta for, low-level minor leaguers. I don't think there's going to be a big haul for Brandon Drury, but this is a 30-year-old guy. It's not necessarily a guy. I mean, a lot of people are just finding out about him because he's having one of his best years ever, but this isn't a young guy. He's 30 years old, so it doesn't fit the timeline for the Reds. But what is your kind of thoughts on Brandon Drury? Because this is another guy that, we could see a team like that's contending, going for that extra push to kind of move for a guy like like Brandon Drury.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list again of potential contending teams and where they're at in their respective division. And look, again, I already mentioned this team, but if I'm the White Sox, I can't have enough good offensive players, right? Like I think adding Drury would add some depth to that offense that they've just been trying to shuffle. Look, La Russa, I don't really trust him as a manager, and I don't always think he puts the best lineup in there to succeed. That's why whenever I'm trying to bet against the White Sox, I have to see their lineup beforehand because I don't know who's going to be in there. They've struggled with injuries at times. I think he would provide them some consistency that they're kind of missing because I know this White Sox team could, at their peak, they're a steady 5-6 run type, offense. They for sure are. Of course, we mentioned their pitching's a little bit inconsistent, but I could see the Reds maybe, shipping them off to, the White Sox for not a whole lot. Because I mean, I look in the division, they're not going to trade him, to the Cardinals or anything. They're absolutely not going to. That's not going to happen. So another team that's in contention would probably be the White Sox, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna probably play second base, third base. Right. I mean, we don't really know. When they said to the Braves, they anticipated him to play second base until Ozzie comes back, which Braves would be an interesting spot. I wouldn't blame them. I mean, they've had obviously their top half of the order is pretty consistent, but they could throw a guy like Drury in there, moves Austin Riley to the 2 or 3, or move who knows where. But I'm curious if Brandon gets dealt. I think he could be. Moving kind of on, I don't really have much more to say about Drury, and I don't have a lot to say about this guy, Trey Mancini. Obviously, he sometimes plays first, sometimes outfield, obviously on the Baltimore Orioles, and we all know his story. So he was talking, or so at least I saw an article talking about him, soaking in his last couple of days at Camden Yards because he doesn't know if it's his last day. And that's kind of the tough part for these guys because you never know when your last day is. And this is a guy that Mancini, who's gone through a lot, especially in Baltimore, he has a ton of fans there. The people love him. So I don't really think Mancini gets dealt. I hope he doesn't, just kind of for the sake of this younger kind of team with Adley Rutschman, Ryan Mountcastle. We love him, obviously. And I feel like he's a good locker room presence. But what's your kind of thoughts on Mancini?
I agree with you. I don't think Mancini gets dealt because I don't think there's a team that's like, we're a Trey Mancini away from the World Series, right? Like he's not. I love him. His on base percentage is great. He's the king of, as you always mentioned, the singles. He's really good at getting timely hitting. But I think the Orioles will value him enough and demand enough that a team's like, we'll hang off the Trey Mancini train. But I mean, as you mentioned, I think he's a great mentor toward that young Orioles team. I mean, the Orange Birds have been one of the bigger surprises of the year to me because last year the Orioles were one of my favorite teams to fade. It was so profitable fading them because they had terrible pitching, hitting that never showed up. And this year they've been quietly a really good offense and their pitching's really come around. So I think the Orioles need to be patient. I think they need to keep a guy like him around. And yeah, I'd kind of be bummed out if they traded him, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page with you. I don't think Mancini gets dealt. I don't see him as, that guy that, takes another team over the hump. And I don't really know his contract details, but the Orioles have like no one on their payroll. So they need to at least pay someone. So Mancini can be that guy. He's certainly earned it in the community for all he's been through and all he's probably done for Baltimore. So certainly support him. Now, the last player before we get into our betting tips for the MLB, Shohei Ohtani, another guy. I didn't even put a position because I don't really know how to define his position, but everyone knows Shohei Ohtani. I highly doubt he gets moved. If the Angels get moved, I don't know what their fans are going to do, honestly. I think their fans might throw in the towel and rage quit on life because Otani's basically been the only bright spot of this whole Angels season. He's been obviously, I mean, you see that the Angels underdogs in every game. And then when Otani comes on the mound, they're at least, even. But even Otani can't carry this team. And what are your kind of thoughts on him? I don't necessarily think he gets traded today, but if he does get traded in the next 1 to 2 years, do you have a place that you think he should go to or could go to?
Yeah, Shohei's obviously a franchise-defining player, right? And the Angels would just be complete fools for letting a generational talent like him out the door in any sense of the capacity. Considering you have Mike Trout and you have a sort of decent nucleus, with Ward, etc. The Angels will be fine. They just kind of had a bad luck of injuries, and I don't know what they've been this year. They've just been a little bit way too inconsistent. So number one, Angels better not deal him. But number two, I'm sitting here even trying to rack my brain about like what team could give him the world essentially. Because if you're the Angels, you're like, all right, we're asking for like 2 to 3 bona fide, starters, all-star type players. The teams that could even offer that would be like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the teams that have a surplus of really good talent and could say, yeah, we'll do a like two or three player for a 1 player kind of swap. So that's really tough. I would love to see him go to a small market team just to be fun like that. But I know how baseball works. The rich get richer, and the Orioles and the Pirates type teams, they stay bad because they don't spend money and they don't make any moves.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no way you can trade. Otani's trade value is probably one of the more interesting kind of like I don't know how you even put together a trade for Ohtani because not only is he a great hitter, you just took his hitting splits from this year or last year. You'd be like, this guy's Juan Soto level, but then you throw in that he's an ace of a pitcher. He's a borderline Cy Young pitcher. It's like you get everything you could ever want. You said it best. He's a generational player. We won't see another Shohei Ohtani for a hot minute. You don't see these guys every single year, every single 5-10 years, every decade. Not many of them. I don't think Ohtani gets dealt here, but I do agree. And he does get dealt a team like maybe the Mets, a team like, the Yankees, a team that has a surplus of talent that can just pair and give the Angels what they're looking for, certainly capable. I would love to see him in, a smaller team uniform. I just don't see it happening. But hey, I've seen crazier things happen, so that would certainly be pretty cool. But there's no other players that we can really think of. So those are kind of our thoughts on those guys. Hopefully we see some more trades, maybe some people that we didn't even expect to get traded over the next week, and we can react to and give you guys our thoughts and opinions. But I kind of want to wrap up this one, and I know Logan, you want to talk about some betting tips for the MLB, so I'll let you take it away, and then I'll kind of give my 2 cents.
Yeah, so if you guys are always wondering how Austin and I do these research, believe it or not, I don't just sit on my phone and go, here's today's pick. Like I do a lot of numbers reading and line reading, and like obviously my favorite site for line reading is OddsJam. Shout out OddsJam, our sponsor. But I have other sites and whatnot that if you guys in the comments are like, can you list them out again? Sure, I would be happy to do it, but I want to list a few that are just my absolute go-to and what I use them for. So primarily I use oddshark.com, navigate to their MLB, their scores and everything. They're a great website. They have all sorts of pitching, splits. They have all sorts of offensive, category ranks. So when I'm like a team's 24th in runs or, offensive or 24th in runs on the road, OddsShark shows you that. So they're really cool in that. And they show all the pitchers, whips, walks, home runs, etc. that they give up in each game. They show the team's game logs of the last 10 games, and you can even expand it to full season. So that's like my number one. If I were to say a one-stop shop type website for a lot of the research, it is OddsShark. But then a website like Swish Analytics is great for, the player props, as Austin always does. And for when I pull the splits of a pitcher versus individual hitters, because that lets you see, all right, who's got whose number, right? Who's batting well versus Garrett Cole today? Who can I potentially count on in this first 5 innings, when it's starting pitcher versus starting pitcher. So Swish Analytics is a really good site on that one. I do love MLB.com for showing me like fun, expanded stats like batting average and balls in play. And MLB.com is also great because if you want to look at like how a team does versus left-handed pitching, you can filter it and it shows you where they rank amongst all 30 teams. That's great. And then StatMuse is this is how Austin and I always look at, how teams or individual players, it's essentially like a Google search, like Royals left-handed batting average on the road, the last 5 games, like it's really great in the sense that it brings it up that. And it's also how we pull, our first inning, when we're looking at Nerfies, I pull their game logs right off StatMuse and I just go one by one and see, did they give up a first inning run? Yes or no? They show all the game logs like that. So those are my favorites. And also, team rankings is how Austin and I find where a team ranks in first inning runs, if they're towards the front or if they're towards the back. I do like team rankings a lot, but that's kind of how we do the research. You see, guys, it's not just one website. It's like a whole boatload of them.
Yeah, betting MLB, in my opinion, is probably one of the toughest sports. And a lot of people obviously know that I do a lot of the NBA videos, do a lot of the NFL videos. And I would argue MLB is probably the hardest one to bet. I mean, you can have a little bit of rough beats in all these sports, but there's no worse beat than, some errors or some random fluke stuff going down in the MLB. But when I start to look at, and I'm just going to talk about player props in general, because I think strikeout props probably the hardest to bet. And if you notice, K props get super sharp, and that's not just for K props, but I feel like K props are the sharpest, the earliest in the MLB. And then we see, the game lines become even sharper and sharper as the season goes on. It becomes harder and harder to win as you get more minor leaguers into games. Pitchers haven't seen minor leaguers. They don't know what they're going to come to the plate with, what they're going to be looking for, things like that. That's why we see a lot of upsets. Like, we saw, I think, what was it, 10 or 11 of 12 teams with a worse record won on Monday. Like, that's just the nature of the MLB. Any team can win any given day. Even the worst teams in the MLB are going to win 60-ish games. So that's why I think it's hardest to bet MLB, because the games are so many games that, one team's not going to take a one loss to the head. They're not going to take it and be like, oh, man, we're not making the playoffs. I mean, maybe when you get to the wild card round and then it really is a one game kind of thing, then you're gone. But I think people need to realize that, it's hard. I would really suggest never doing money line parlays. I saw so many people on an Astros Dodgers money line parlay on Monday. Mm-mm. And, both of them lost. And that's the nature of the MLB. There's a reason you see these FanDuel odds boosts. And, we say the odds boosts are cursed. They are cursed. I will say that. But we mainly mean it in a sense of they're always boosting money line parlays. And they know those are the most unprofitable bets in the industry. And while I know people love doing them, and I'll be a hypocrite when NFL season comes around, because I'll have one money line parlay of the week. But that's just because I want to provide the content for you guys and I want to sweat something out with you. But I understand that they're not profitable. I'm not expecting to cash it. That's why you see me normally going for long shots, just hoping that we strike gold one time. But in terms of websites that we're talking about, you obviously named a lot of them. My favorite one would be Baseball Savant. Now, if you've maybe been watching Calling Our Shot for, I don't know, we coming up on our 2-year anniversary, I think in November, but a lot of people probably don't know that I went to school for statistics. And if you like statistics, you like numbers, Baseball Savant probably be your heaven, because there's so many different numbers. Honestly, too many numbers sometimes, but they have tons of numbers from how, a pitcher throws, what pitches they throw, how teams do against certain pitches, how Rafael Devers hits a curveball, a four-seam fastball, a strikeout percentage. They have so many numbers there. So I think Baseball Savant's one of the cooler sites. Baseball Reference, obviously a really good one. You could see, splits of, Brandon Drury versus left-handed hitters versus right-handers versus, different kind of things. So I really do like all of those. I think you named a lot of the good sites. I really just think baseball, baseball is not a sport that I suggest putting your full bankroll on, different things. It's definitely, one of the more unpredictable sports to probably bet on. But Logan, what do you kind of think to that?
Yeah, I want to piggyback off what you said, because you made a lot of good points in there. Like, I think one of your best points is kind of the whole randomness of baseball. And what it really comes down to, and I know you guys don't like when I do it, but line reading in baseball is so key, because you have to ask yourself, why is a pitcher with an 8 ERA getting a really favorable line compared to the ace on the other side, on the mound with like a 2 or 3 ERA? You have to ask yourself this stuff and say, where do the books want me? And like, the numbers and all the websites that I laid out for you are great. And they can help you make, they can make you feel better about your pick. But at the end of the day, baseball is so key to line reading. And let me be the first to tell you guys, I was extremely square. I was only betting, like, August of 2021. I was only betting the bets that made sense to me. and I had a lot of 1 and 3 days in there, or 0 and 4 days. And that was just baffling to me. I couldn't understand. I'm like, why? It's because the books are sharpening up. Those pitchers that had a 5 or 6 earned run type games can surprise the team with a 1 or 2 earned run type game. Those things happen in baseball. So you have to expect the unexpected. And as Austin always mentioned, moneyline parlays are not the move in baseball. I promise you that. I will never. A 2-leg parlay is about the most comfortable I'm ever comfortable with in baseball, and it's not a 2-leg parlay of favorites. It's probably a 2-leg parlay of run lines or something favorable for you.
And kind of piggybacking off that, not only do sharper line, I mean, people need to understand that it's not just baseball that gets sharp. I mean, we talk about the NBA lines. As the season goes on, those lines become even sharper and sharper. My time doing the morning videos, I can't go DeJounte Murray plays today. Bang, Darius Garland. All right, there's the video, guys. Like, I can't do that because the lines are getting super sharp. They know what to expect. And that's why you see, we normally are in NBA time. We're normally pretty profitable in the first half of the year. And then the lines get pretty sharp. Teams start to hone in on defense. That still goes on, not just player props, but spreads and over-unders. You see a ton of randomness in the NBA the second half of the year. Even though teams are trying harder, they make those lines even more juiced. They'll make the Jazz 12-point favorites and they get blown out. Although I don't know if the Jazz will be 12-point favorites this year if they trade Donovan Mitchell for a King's ransom. But that's not here or there. We'll talk about the NBA in a couple of weeks. But I think baseball is a tough sport to bet, and I understand, why people might get angry, but you don't have to bet every game on the board. And the worst thing you can do, and that's not just for baseball, for every sport, is the chase. We obviously see a ton of people in the late night chase games. We're talking about the Dodgers, the Giants, teams chasing those kind of games. And chasing never win. You never win chasing. You might win one night chasing like a 1-unit loss with a 2-unit winner. It doesn't work out long term. That's how majority of sports bettors are, not profitable. It's because they're always chasing things, always trying to recoup the losses and turning a 1-unit loss night into a 3 or 4-unit loss night. That really hurts. And it's tough to go to sleep in those nights. I've been there. I've lost a bunch of my bankroll before just by forcing a lot of bets, but I've dialed it down. You'll probably see some more, 2-3-unit bets out of me come NBA and NFL season, but that's because those are the most bets I'm confident in. But you just gotta, I don't really know how to, I try to mold it into the best that I can, but you can't chase losses. I think that's probably the big thing. And obviously bankroll management.
Do you know how many times I've woken up to betting Dodgers -1.5, and I check the score in the morning because you and I are East Coast guys, can't stay up till 1 a.m. And I'm like, oh, there's an outright out. Like, okay, why did I do that? Why was I so stupid? Like the books put the Dodgers at 10 o'clock. They put them in that spot for a reason. I'm not even gonna lie to you. They love putting that -1.5. Looks so tempting. I just have to preach, guys. A team in baseball, even though you might think in your head, oh, they're so much better than the other team, they're really not. All it takes is one swing of the bat, and that it's really just that random. So you have to. It's a lot different game. And I think probably as people are betting baseball with us, they're understanding this. It's a lot different betting baseball than the NBA, because the NBA is so star driven and so influenced by 1 or 2 really good players that can affect the game. Baseball's not like that, right? There's a pitcher, and then there's 9 hitters in the lineup, and a lot of randomness happens. Some days it's 0 for 4, some days it's 3 for 4. Just how it is. That's baseball. But I think we gave the people a lot of really good points on that.
I agree. And if you guys ever want us to talk about different topics, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. We're happy to do so. But that's going to end this podcast, episode 44. Episode 45 is going to be a very good one next week, next Wednesday. We're talking all about the MLB trade deadline. Hopefully we see some teams make some big moves, see some big names go different places, see some new uniforms. That'd be absolutely lovely. But we'll be back again next week, episode 45. You see your daily videos coming out. And NFL, this will be our last podcast before NFL season's in full swing with preseason. So we appreciate you guys always for tuning in. Austin, Logan, we're signing out.